Everyone thinks frugal people are the ones missing out, deprived, doing without, eating plain rice while everyone else orders takeout, wearing the same jacket for 6 years while everyone else upgrades every season. But the truth is almost backwards. The people who look like they're missing out are usually the ones who end up with everything, and they don't feel poor doing it. They feel almost nothing at all, which is exactly the part nobody explains. The people who look like they're winning are usually the ones quietly falling behind. Here's what you're going to see in the next few minutes. 2 coworkers, same salary, same office, same starting point, and 10 years later, completely different lives because of one repeating decision neither of them noticed they were making. You're going to find out why the $4 coffee was never the real problem and what the actual number quietly draining your account looks like. You're going to see the system that was built on purpose to make saving money feel harder than it should. You're going to learn the exact moment when frugality stops being a spreadsheet and starts being a feeling. And you're going to meet the most frugal person you know, except you don't know it because they never post about it. But before any of that, there's a fear buried in this video that most people won't want to hear. Because by the end, you're going to realize that some of what feels like progress in your life right now is actually the thing quietly working against you. Picture 2 coworkers, same company, same job title, same paycheck landing on the same day every 2 weeks. Call them person A and person B because their names don't matter. What happens to them does. Person A gets his coffee from the shop downstairs every morning. Order in on Tuesdays and Fridays. New phone every year because the old one feels slow, even when it isn't. A car upgrade every 4 years because that's just what you do. None of it feels reckless. None of it feels like overspending. It feels normal. It feels like a life. Person B brings coffee from home in a thermos that's older than some of his coworkers' relationships. Cooks the same 6 meals on rotation, gets slightly bored of them, cooks them anyway, keeps a phone until the screen genuinely cracks, drives a car with over 180,000 miles on it, still running fine, still getting him to work every day without complaint. For years, nobody at that office thinks anything is happening. There's no scoreboard, no spreadsheet on the break room wall. Person A looks, if anything, like he's doing better. Newer things, better lunches, a car that still has that faint new car smell every few years. Person B looks, if anything, like someone who's a little behind, a little stuck, maybe a little cheap. There's a specific Tuesday, 3 years in, that neither of them remembers because nothing about it feels remarkable. Person A gets a notification that his card was charged for a streaming bundle he added during a free trial for a show he finished in a weekend. He doesn't notice. Person B gets the same notification for the same trial, cancels it in 11 seconds, and forgets he ever did it. Multiply that Tuesday by 500 more just like it, spread across a decade, and you start to understand where the gap actually comes from. It was never one decision. It was thousands of nearly identical, forgettable ones, all pointing in opposite directions. 10 years pass. Person A is still working the same job, still needs it, still can't leave it, because leaving it means the payments stop and the payments can't stop. Person B put in his 2 weeks notice 8 months ago. Not because he won the lottery. Not because of some secret investment nobody else knew about. Because the gap between what he earned and what he spent had been quietly compounding for a decade, and one day the number on the other side of that gap was big enough that work became optional. Same salary, same starting point, same 10 years, completely different outcomes. This is the part most people skip past because it sounds like something they've heard before. Spend less than you earn. Save the difference. It sounds obvious. It sounds boring. But here's what nobody tells you about that gap. The size of it isn't determined by how much you earn. It's determined by something happening in your brain that you were never taught to notice. And that's exactly what the rest of this video is going to expose. Person A didn't fail because he was careless. He failed because every single purchase on its own made sense. The coffee was $3. The delivery fee was reasonable. The new phone was $100 a month, spread out, painless. Nobody sits down and decides to stay stuck at a job for another decade. It happens one reasonable decision at a time, until the decisions add up into a life you didn't choose on purpose. You just arrived at it. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because you're probably doing a version of this right now. Not the extreme version, the quiet version, the subscription you forgot you had, the slightly nicer version of something you didn't need to upgrade, the little conveniences that felt like nothing in the moment and feel like everything when you add them up on the 31st of December. Here's the fear buried underneath all of this. It's not that you're bad with money. Most people who struggle financially aren't reckless. They're normal. They're doing what everyone around them is doing. The fear is this: the version of your life that looks the most successful on the outside right now might be the exact version quietly costing you the most freedom later. Person A's life looked better for 9 of those 10 years. That's the trap. It doesn't look like a mistake while it's happening. It only looks like one afterward, when the gap becomes impossible to ignore. And here's the part that should actually bother you. The gap wasn't really about money at all. It's what was happening underneath the decisions neither of them was paying attention to. The thing driving person A's spending wasn't laziness or stupidity or a lack of discipline. Plenty of disciplined, intelligent people end up exactly where he did. It was something much older, much more automatic, and much harder to notice from the inside. Something built into how humans compare themselves to the people around them, and something, as you're about to see, has been deliberately engineered to work against you. You've probably never met person A or person B, but you've met a version of both of them because most people are living somewhere between the two, closer to one side than they'd like to admit. And the uncomfortable part isn't figuring out which one you are. It's realizing that the gap between them didn't come from a single big decision. It came from something quieter, something running underneath almost every choice you make with money, whether you notice it or not. The hidden force isn't a lack of discipline. It's a comparison engine running in the background of your brain, and it never turns off. For most of human history, that engine was useful. It kept small groups of people roughly equal, which kept the group alive. If everyone in your tribe had the same amount, you weren't tempted to take risks you didn't need to take. But that engine wasn't built for a world where you see hundreds of other people's lives every single day, curated, filtered, and posted specifically because they look good. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the neighbor with the new car and an influencer in another country. It registers both the same way. Someone else has something. You don't. Fix that. This is where the $4 coffee stops mattering and the $14.99 charge starts mattering a lot more, because the coffee is a decision. You feel yourself make it. You stand in line, you pay, you notice. The subscription is not a decision. You made it once, months ago, maybe for a free trial, maybe for a show you watched twice, and then it became invisible. It renews itself. It doesn't ask permission. Most people who check their bank statement for the first time in months don't find one forgotten subscription. They find 4, sometimes 6, a streaming service they stopped watching, an app they downloaded for one trip, a membership that auto-renewed a year ago and has been quietly charging them every month since. None of them, on their own, feel like a problem. Together, they're often more expensive than the coffee habit people feel guilty about. And this isn't an accident. This is the second part of the hidden force. Not just your own psychology, but a system built by people who understand your psychology better than you do. Here's how powerful defaults really are. In one famous retirement study, simply changing the default from sign up to you're already enrolled unless you opt out pushed participation from under half to over 90%. Same people, same forms, different default. Nobody explained that fact to you before your last free trial auto-renewed, but the same principle was working on you anyway. The default option on almost every checkout page is the one that costs you more, because defaults work. Free trials are timed to end right when you've forgotten you signed up. Flash sales appear on your phone within hours of payday because someone, somewhere, has the data on exactly when you're most likely to spend. None of this is a conspiracy theory. It's publicly documented behavioral design used by companies that have every incentive to make saving money feel like the harder choice and spending money feel like the easier one. So think about frugality less like a single decision and more like a set of levels, each one harder to see than the last. Level 1 is obvious. It's the big stuff. The car payment you can't really afford, the subscription box you signed up for on a whim. Most people catch this level eventually, usually when the bank balance forces them to look. Level 2 is quieter. It's the convenience spending, the delivery fees, the small upgrades, the version of something slightly nicer than the one you already had that worked fine. Level 3 is the one almost nobody sees because it isn't spending at all. It's the spending you avoided that you didn't get credit for, the upgrade you didn't buy, the car you kept for 2 extra years. Nobody applauds you for a purchase that didn't happen. There's no receipt for restraint. And that's exactly why it's the level that actually builds wealth. While the first 2 levels just look responsible without doing much of anything. There's a specific moment that separates people who are managing their spending from people who have actually changed. It isn't a spreadsheet. It isn't a budgeting app notification. It's a feeling, and it usually happens somewhere unremarkable. A store, a checkout page, a parking lot. You're holding something you want. You've done the math. You can technically afford it. And instead of the usual tug of war in your head, there's nothing. You just put it back or close the tab and walk away, and you don't feel deprived. You don't feel like you're missing out. You feel almost nothing at all, which is the strangest part, because for years, nothing was never available to you as an option. It was always want it or feel guilty for wanting it. The day nothing shows up instead is the day frugality stopped being math and became identity. It's worth naming exactly why this comparison engine got so much louder in recent years. It isn't only social media showing you curated lives, it's that the sheer volume of comparison has multiplied. A generation ago, you compared yourself to maybe a few dozen people you actually knew. Now, the engine runs on hundreds of data points a day, most of them from strangers, most of them showing only the version of life worth showing. Your brain was never built to process that much comparison, so it does the only thing it knows how to do. It treats all of it as real and quietly recalibrates what normal spending looks like, upward, a little more, every single day. Person A, somewhere in year 7, upgraded his car again. Same reasoning as always, the old one just felt outdated. He didn't know it yet, but that was the last upgrade he'd be able to comfortably afford without stretching. The math hadn't caught up to him. It just hadn't been due yet. Person B hit that moment almost without noticing it happened. Somewhere around year 6, standing in an electronics store, looking at a phone that was faster than his, newer than his, better than his in every measurable way, and just not caring, not suppressing the urge, not white-knuckling his way past a craving. The urge simply wasn't there anymore, because whatever wiring used to fire off automatically had quietly gone quiet, worn down by 6 years of small, repeated choices. None of these 3 levels are about morality. Level 1 isn't bad, and level 3 isn't good in some virtuous sense. They're just stages of visibility. How much of your own spending you're actually able to see. Most people assume they're at level 2, doing reasonably well when a real look at their statements would place them at level 1. And almost nobody starts at level 3. It has to be built, slowly, through the exact kind of repetition that rewired person B without him realizing it was happening. Before we go further, here's something worth doing right now while it's fresh. Think about which of those 3 levels you're actually operating at. The obvious spending, the quiet convenience spending, or the invisible restraint that never gets credit. Drop it in the comments. Not to be judged, but because most people have never actually said it out loud, and saying it out loud is usually the first level up. And if you know someone stuck at level 1 right now, the person one bad month away from a real problem, send them this, not as a call out, as the video you wish someone had sent you. Because what happens next is the part almost nobody talks about, and it isn't about saving money at all. It's about what saving money quietly turns into once enough time passes. The most valuable thing companies have taken from you isn't your money. It's the 2 seconds you used to have to change your mind. There used to be a small gap between wanting something and buying it. A few seconds, sometimes a few minutes, where a person could change their mind. That gap is where most self-control actually lived. And in 2026, an entire industry has been quietly built to remove it. Your phone knows what you almost bought last week and reminds you at exactly the right moment to finish the job. Apps default to yearly plans because the monthly cancellation rate is too high to profit from. One-click checkout doesn't just make buying easier. It deletes the pause that used to give people a chance to reconsider on purpose, because a pause is the enemy of a sale. It's not that people have gotten worse at managing money. It's that managing money has quietly gotten harder on purpose for reasons that have nothing to do with your best interests. Grocery prices adjust themselves in real time depending on when you walk into the store. Streaming bundles quietly raise their price $1 or $2 a year, small enough that almost nobody cancels over it, large enough that it adds up across a dozen services. Buy now, pay later options turn a single purchase into 4 invisible ones, spaced out just far enough that they stop feeling connected to each other. None of this shows up as one big villain moment. It shows up as friction removed, one convenience at a time, until spending requires almost no thought at all, which is exactly the point, because thoughtless spending is profitable spending, which is why the people actually winning at this right now don't look like it. The most frugal person you know almost certainly isn't posting about it because there's nothing to post. There's no photo of a subscription you canceled, no content in driving the same car for 12 years, no highlight reel for a Tuesday night dinner that cost $4 and took 15 minutes. It's your neighbor with the paid-off house and the decade-old car who never talks about money at all. It's the aunt who seems to always have things handled, who never panics about a bill, who you've never once heard complain about a paycheck not stretching far enough. Not because she earns more than everyone else, because the math had been working in her favor for years, the same way it did for person B, while everyone assumed her quiet life meant a small life. Meanwhile, person A is doing fine, technically, still employed, still making payments on time. From the outside, nothing looks broken. But he's 4 years from retirement age with less saved than he thinks, still telling himself he'll catch up once the car is paid off, not realizing there's always another car. That's not a tragedy. It's just the quiet, unremarkable ending to 10,000 reasonable decisions, none of which felt like the one that mattered. That's the real twist hiding underneath all of this. The version of success that gets posted, liked, and admired is usually the version still working for the money. The version that actually has freedom usually looks boring from the outside because freedom doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It just quietly exists in the background of someone's ordinary Tuesday while they go about a life nobody's impressed by and everybody secretly wants. Think about how strange that actually is. An entire economy of content exists to show you what winning looks like, and almost none of it is accurate. Not because it's lying exactly, but because the people who've actually won this game have no reason to show you. There's no algorithm rewarding a paid-off car. There's no engagement spike for a decade of unremarkable Tuesdays. The version of frugality that actually works is, by definition, the version nobody sees, which means everything you've been shown as an example of financial success has almost certainly been survivorship bias dressed up as inspiration. The people who spent their way into a highlight reel are the ones with a camera pointed at them. The people who quietly built something real were always too busy living it to film it. And this is exactly why extreme frugality gets misjudged so badly. It's not a lesser version of a good life. It's usually the quiet setup for the freest version of one. The version where a bad month at work doesn't feel like a crisis, where a difficult boss doesn't feel like a life sentence, where the space between what you earn and what you need is wide enough to actually breathe in. Nobody claps for that. Nobody posts about it. It just works, silently in the background, for years, until one day it's the reason someone can walk away from something that isn't working for them while everyone else is still calculating whether they can afford to. So here's everything this really comes down to. Two people can start in the exact same place and end up in completely different lives, and the difference was never the size of their paycheck. It was one repeating decision, made so quietly, neither of them noticed it happening. The $4 coffee was never the real problem. The real problem was the $14.99 charge you forgot existed, multiplied by however many of those are sitting in your account right now. The system you're spending inside of wasn't an accident. It was built deliberately by people who profit every time you choose convenience over control. And the moment everything actually changes isn't a spreadsheet moment at all. It's the quiet, almost boring moment you stand in front of something you want and simply feel nothing and walk away unbothered. The people who've actually won this game are rarely the ones talking about it. They're the ones who no longer need to. Notice, too, that nothing about this required a higher income. Person B didn't out-earn Person A. The aunt with the paid-off house didn't need a bigger salary than her neighbors. The gap was never about how much came in. It was about how much of it was allowed to quietly leave, unnoticed, before either of them had a chance to decide whether it was worth it. None of this was ever about being cheap. It was never about deprivation or missing out or living smaller than everyone else. It was about noticing the invisible forces that were already spending your money for you long before you had a say in it, and quietly taking that say back. Extreme frugality was never the finish line. It was just the method. The actual finish line was always freedom. The ability to say no to a job, a demand, a version of your own life that stopped fitting, without needing to check your bank account first. That's not a money goal. That's an identity, and it's available to almost anyone willing to notice what's actually happening underneath their own spending. There's one more thing worth knowing. Spending isn't actually where most people lose their financial freedom. The next invisible system changes what you believe you deserve before you ever open your wallet. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. That's exactly where the next video picks up. Subscribe if you'd rather see it before it finds you.